Thank you very much, Luis. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank INCIBE for having invited me, and this is a great opportunity. And very many thanks to all of you for being here in what is practically the last presentation of these two very intensive days that we are involved in, and it'll end after my presentation with a closing ceremony. My name is David Purón. I'm the CPO of TipTap Labs, founder and vice president of engineering. And as like many of you, I have been working in cybersecurity for a long time now, bringing products to the market, and in some cases, if you allow me, evangelizing or trying to raise awareness or transmit some aspects of cybersecurity, and that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'll try and do this. I'll try and convey to you the trends, in my viewpoint, in the connected world, as the slogan said, for this 11th edition of ENISE, this world connected by the Internet of Things. On the slide, you have a graph of what we call the evolution of the Internet, or the revolution that some people would say. We started some time ago in the 1950s with those huge machines developed by IBM, and we've had several stages, mini computers, personal computers, desktops, laptops, mobile devices. And now, what do I see in this graph? My attention is drawn first by the volumes. When we spoke of mainframes, when we speak of those huge computers at the beginning of the 1960s or in the 1970s, these volumes were thousands, or perhaps dozens of thousands, or all the way up to a million. Now with mobile devices, I could ask in the room, who doesn't have a mobile device? And I'm certain no one would raise their hands. There are approximately 6 billion mobile devices in the world. So it's practically one per inhabitant in the world. In the case of IoT, we are speaking of Gartner predictions of 20 to 26 billion devices connected in the year 2020. This is absolutely exponential. Another curious thing is that none of these systems has disappeared. It's not that the mobile devices are going to replace the PCs or laptops. They are all coexistent. We have mainframes, we have laptops, we have PCs, we have the Internet of Things, telephones, and all of this coexists. And this makes it an absolute nightmare for systems administrators. Another thing that draws the attention is the closeness, how the technology is closer and closer to us. We started with the mainframes hidden somewhere in a data center in the Nevada desert in the US. And little by little, we have the PCs that are at our home, and then the computers, laptops that we carry in our bags, and the cell phones that are in our pockets. And nowadays, suddenly we have the Internet of Things, which is fully integrated into things. For instance, the case that we all think of is the connected fridge. This refrigerator has a sensor that may detect when we run out of milk or eggs. Since it's connected to the Internet, it'll do the shopping for you, and your shopping shows up at home. Some may like it, some may not. I prefer to go to the street and do my shopping personally. I think this is going a bit too far. But in a consumer environment, we see these things happen. But what happens if we wish to control other kinds of stocks, the stocks at a factory, for instance? What happens if we are capable of sensorizing each element that we manufacture and know exactly where everything is and what its state is like, has it been good or bad, and communicate this directly to our suppliers? This, a few years ago, was a guy with a notebook jotting down as he or she walked up and down the factory. Nowadays, that is costly and highly inefficient. So now that we started to have these things, obviously the industry is moving in this direction. Another case of IoT, that of predictive maintenance, be it of machinery, be it of other elements, A car. My car, I have to perform maintenance every 15,000 kilometers or every year and a half. What happens if I had the car stopped at the garage? What if I do my own maintenance? So the current model is inefficient. We'll have to go to a model in which there are sensors in the car to detect whether there is real maintenance going on and what requires maintenance. Perhaps the wheels are okay, but not the engine. So we have to be capable of acquiring all the data and transmitting them among different stakeholders, which for me in itself is a revolution. Or other kinds of maintenance that we may be a bit, which may be a bit scary if you allow for the word. Maintenance of our body, of human bodies. What if we were carrying sensors in a pacemaker transmitting our status? Well, the emergency rooms would be emptier and patient care would be far more immediate and in real time. So in such cases, these cases are happening. There are cases on the industrial side and cases on the so-called more consumer side that are less business oriented. The first trend that I show on this graph is a huge difference between consumer IoT and industrial IoT. This is not my graph. I've taken it from someone else. It's very visible, and it's more or less the consensus in the industry. Industrial IoT is going to be many, many times larger in the future regarding investment and number of devices and engineering than consumer IoT, the thermostats or refrigerators. So industrial IoT, in cars, machines, energy, electricity, etc. That's where the huge IoT block is going to lie. Industrial IoT, the IIoT, is very difficult to define. If we were to ask 50 people here, I'm sure each one would have a personal definition. I'll give you mine. I've taken some trouble to understand it because, after all, the industry is highly sensorized. There are actuators, PLCs, the SCADA systems that allow you to see and monitor the production chains. You can open and close valves, etc. So IoT contributes what? Three basic things to me. The data are acquired and analyzed more efficiently. I've seen factories that are installing sensors made with a Raspberry something on the valves to control temperature. This does not interfere in the production chain. It's done very swiftly. The whole factory is sensorized and not using the old certification systems. We have more data. In the past we had some data that came from the production chain. Nowadays we can have data about practically everything. We can cross temperature data at the factory with the amount of people that came in or out, access systems, production, logistics. All of it can be crossed. We have far more data than we had before, and more so crossed. And the third leg, which is practically one of the most important ones, more open. In the past, the IoT systems for operational technology were totally closed. Info was transferred from the production chain to some manufacturer. And nowadays, the idea of IoT is to open up those data sets to any stakeholder, be it a customer, be it a supplier, be it the individuals who provide business intelligence, or anything. Any data needs to be easy to open and to cross-check the data with the company and other companies. This I see as the revolution in IoT. Since Spider-Man's grandfather said, no power is exempt from responsibility. And in this case, no challenge is exempt of problems. What's the problem with IoT in general, or number one? You can imagine, I assume. This is a conference about cybersecurity. So it's not good for me to mention the price, but it's security itself. But not because I say so. Many surveys have been conducted. This is just one of them. This is by the IoT Developers Survey 2017. As you'll see, security is highlighted as problem number one for developers, customers, users of IoT, in 46.7% compared to other issues such as operational ability, connectivity, etc. So this is number one problem always. This is what is actually hindering the use of the Internet of Things. Another interesting thing about the Internet of Things for hackers, why is security really a problem? The Internet of Things is opening up a new world for hackers with very interesting features. First of all, scalability, scale of the problem. We've spoken a lot about the WannaCry crisis in May of this year. I remember another crisis on the 21st of October last year about a DOS attack on DNS servers that actually made the internet collapse. They brought down Twitter, Amazon. Half of the world's internet stopped working for a day. This attack was made controlling 100,000 cameras connected across the world. At the end of the day, the scale of the problem, the amount of devices, makes it very attractive for cyber criminals to attack IoT. The second point that makes IoT interesting for a cyber criminal is the scale of the problems. We have also spoken during this conference many times about the Stuxnet, and we have the Indestroyer last year that left the whole of Kiev without electricity for an hour. This was by attacking a plant, the accumulators at the electricity plant. And since IoT is connected to technology and connected to the physical world, the harm that can be caused, unfortunately, is much greater. Then, on the other hand, we have technology that is very immature. It's like the computers or the internet of the 1980s and 1990s, with hardly any encryption inside each website. Now, between IoT devices and cameras, it's not the same. Here we've performed a simple search on the browser looking for a port and a header, and we get hundreds of thousands of cameras open to the world whose transmission is not being encrypted. So really, the lack of maturity of technology helps a lot and is very attractive for hackers. Last but not least, I'd like to highlight that IoT is the weakest link in the chain. We've seen in Tic Tac Labs, when we have audited companies, there was a robot, properly securitized with regards to the firmware, but then is connected to the same network as the critical IT databases. And it's an open network without a passport. Obviously, the robot is going to be the access point. Once they are there, they can start distributing the malware all over the board. Here we have the news of a company called Target, which reported a data breach last year. They had entered through the air conditioning. They were connected to the same systems of IT, so they entered through the air conditioning and they crushed up all the information. So basically, it's not always the IoT element, the one who wishes to be attacked, but the access point to the network. Some figures from a report made by Symantec this year. These are figures referring to a honeypot they put for IoT. As you can see, the hours from January 2016 to December 2016, the hours during which the honeypot was being attacked practically doubled throughout the year. At the beginning of the year, they were attacking for 5 hours. At the end of the year, they were attacking for 9. So as you can see, these IoT attacks are on the rise, and there is proof of it. Below you have the origins of the attack. I've loved the the round table that we listened to a while ago, where they spoke of attribution. So don't take these figures at face value. They may have been simulated, or they may be simulated by attacks from elsewhere. But out of curiosity, that you may know that China and the United States last year in Symantec's Honeypot were the ones that most attacked. Let's now see how cyber criminals can attack an IoT. It's very simple things. Technology is always behind, and is not prepared, not even for the most basic things. First, insecure configurations in the attack of DOS or DNS. One could think of something hardly very elaborate. It was very simple. The default password was 1234 for the cameras. So for cyber criminals, it was as simple as scanning the network, looking for the cameras and access using the password 1234. As administrators, they controlled thousands of cameras with malware, and they managed to attack the DNS. Insecure configurations are usually the first reason of attack. It's the first thing that any hacker is going to look for. Secondly, it's a combination, a dangerous combination, the 0 days, the vulnerabilities as published by researchers or malicious entities, combined with the more critical thing, which is the lack of updates. Nowadays, very few IoT systems can be updated, and those that can be updated, one must see how they are being updated. This is done without proper signature or proper startup. So whenever we have a 0 day, like we had the crack yesterday, the other day with WPA2, and so many devices are being attacked, and many of them cannot be updated. The third vector in the attack, the insecure networks. As I said before, there's a lack of encryption oftentimes, or they connect to open Wi-Fi networks, and it's easy to access that way. The fourth vector for the attack, and very important in IoT, the fake identities. Currently, in order to identify an IoT device, we'll use a serial number or similar things. So identifying a serial number or cracking into it is trivial. If the first one ends on 55, the next one will end on 56 or 57, or very simply any simple series. And this is by default very insecure. We have to use more secure identifiers with different combinations, the dual factor identification, etc., in order to make it much difficult for hackers to crack in. Then we have the physical vector. In such cases, the IoT systems are not normally under surveillance. They can be anywhere in the world. They can be cars or things in the smart city that are not identified 100%. So to approach an IoT system for a cyber criminal that is now practically a physical criminal was very simple in the past. I don't know whether you saw the other day or some time ago the Tempest attack that I freaked out with practically. He was taking an electromagnetic wave measurer, put it next to a CPU, and what the CPU was transmitting was basically the bits could be distilled just by taking the electromagnetic waves, and through this they managed to get hold of several encryption keys. Of course, if you're with a PC and you have someone standing next to you with an antenna and a field measure, you're going to be concerned. However, if it's out there in the world, people are doing what they please, and you might be walking out because you like to walk your scanner. So the physical vector, as this is very important. So far, the bad news. You must be concerned, of course, and afraid. And in a while, the good news. There's a very important trend in cybersecurity, in IoT, and there are things that are being done that are very interesting. The first is to transfer to the device Security. Right now, the cloud security is more or less okay. There are many systems, there are many audit mechanisms up there. We also have perimeter security systems such as firewalls and the likes. But this is not enough in IT oftentimes, because the IoT devices could be anywhere around the world. There are many initiatives to put the security at the endpoint. Yesterday, ARM launched a new PSA architecture for hardware that is securitized at the factory. So it's mostly the endpoint and the devices are now being securitized. Another example of good practices that I recommend that you follow is called light encryption. When I say that in IoT you don't encrypt things, it's not because you don't want to. Normally it's because you can't. Normal encryption for a PC with a 128 key on a small chip at 500 megahertz with a few kilobytes of RAM, to encrypt a file of 250 Ks can take 8 minutes or 10. It's not practical. Generating a certificate may take hours. What is being done right now is creating algorithms for light encryption. There are many proposals out there. There's an initiative in the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States who are choosing the best algorithms for light encryption. For instance, you have Chasqui. In order to encrypt a byte, it takes what takes normally 90 CPU cycles. Here it takes 7. Or when 8 kilobytes are needed, Chasqui just needs 400 bytes. These are algorithms with strong encryption but much lighter. The NIST is meeting, and in October we're going to have another meeting, and we're going to choose which algorithms they're going to recommend to this purpose. Another trend that we see out there is the step from vertical IoT solutions, where you could build an IoT device, then you call the manufacturer and say, I want a smart thermostat. And the manufacturers will give you everything, the hardware, the software, the programming. And they practically even say to which cloud you had to connect. What we're seeing now is that there's more of a separation in these strata. And some people are specializing in clouds, others are specializing in the application, others are specializing in hardware, and some are specializing in the OS, operating system. So here is where, since there is more specialization, more security can be provided. With a PC, as of today, if you are programming your app, the security parcel that you have to control is very small, because at the end of the day, Windows or Linux or Apple are controlling absolutely all the low part, and you can disengage. But in IoT, it should be the same. There are some companies, like ourselves, specializing in very specific things of the device, such as the operating system, where you can provide security that is going to be important for any application. Another trend that I'm seeing helping security is the step from non-standardized networks to standardized or harmonized networks. What does this mean? Well, the latter are the ones that are regularized. There is an auction of the spectrum. There are some laws and regulations applicable. What's happened so far with IoT? Well, since there was no regulation, there are networks such as LoRa or Sigfox, which are very fast to deploy and that you can set up at home or whenever. You can start radiating that frequency, because if it's not harmonized nor standardized. What's the problem of this network? I insist these are networks that work very well, but the problem is that since they're not regulated nor harmonized, anyone can come along and start radiating on the same frequency and cause a direct denial of service. Legally, nothing is going to happen because they can do it. If you go to the 900 megahertz wavelength and start radiating, then you're into trouble. So once we now have harmonized and standardized IoT networks such as NB-IoT or 5G, there are pilot projects in many cities across Spain. And I believe that through this harmonization and standardization and regulation, they're going to help security much. And finally, we could not leave this meeting without speaking of the famous blockchain. The blockchain that has the industry confronted as to whether it is or not useful. I'll give you my opinion, which you may agree with or not. To me, blockchain is not technology, it's more some sort of a philosophy of how to do things. It's all about distributing the information at different levels and not centralizing it, and transmitting and validating it as securely. As philosophy, that sounds very interesting, because you get rid of the central server for storage and validation, which is the direct vector for attacks, and you break it down and distribute it. If you wish to compromise a blockchain network, you have to compromise more than 51% of the nodes in the chain. If we really reach 26,000 devices, as Gartner says, in 2020, and if we are capable of creating networks of blockchain that are federated among different suppliers and among different devices, with enough devices, then I believe that this would be a very powerful tool to store any kind of information, even sensitive information such as governmental or insurance or smart cities. So anything that is stored into this system, I believe, is going to be very secure. We haven't yet found use of blockchain that will make blockchain plus IoT explode. But I think we will find the way, and in a few years we shall see these new associations. Let's see if I don't have to come back and apologize in a few years from now. Well, time's up, I'm afraid. And so to wrap up these 4 items, that is my take-home message. First, we have IoT, with lots of development, lots of investment, and lots of work in cybersecurity. Because, as I said, security is the #1 concern as perceived by the industry in the Internet of Things. According to reality, and I'm not making this up, there are figures and studies out there, IoT attacks are growing. That's why it's very necessary to have these security actions. And finally, there are many trends, many activities, such as light encryption or blockchains, and I would pursue them if I were you, because it's nice to be in the midst of the revolution, but saved from it. So I hope you may enjoy it the way we are enjoying it, and that's all, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know whether we have time for questions. If no one says no and you wish to ask a question, I'll be delighted to try to reply to it.
Muy rápida. Hola, David. Gracias por la ponencia.
Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask you for the problems in the implementation and adaptation of IoT and security problems in dual architectures. Well, as I mentioned at the end of my presentation, well, I have to be very brief because we're really behind. So I'll meet you outside and tell you what I think.